Hello, it's Deborah Pardes, and welcome to Voices of Swell. And I'm so happy to be sparking a conversation today with Juliet Blake. And when I say spark, I mean that there's no bounds to where this may go. Because someone like Juliet has so many interests and passions. And I'm just opening up this playground for us to talk in. And this playground that is swell. It's asynchronous and it's open-ended. And I just have no idea where we'll go. And I'm so excited. As the head of TV for TED, I think that Juliet is so well positioned to talk with us about the state of talk itself and the idea of curating in the 21st century. There's so much noise, and how do we hear the music? How do we find the great stories and the great storytellers? And whatever their medium is, how do we discover them? Because we need to lift each other, especially now. And that's what TED does so well. It finds people who lift us. Juliet, thank you so much for joining Swell. We're a new community of deep listeners and thoughtful talkers. And I want to start a conversation with you by putting us sort of in this metaphorical chairlift. So we don't know each other. We're surrounded by really fresh air and beauty. And I'd love you to tell me what you want me to know about you while we ride up this mountain before we're dropped to the top and have to ski off and maybe never see each other again, which would be tragic. But that's what happens. I find this way more expansive than meeting you in a metaphorical elevator. So just go with me here. I'm so happy to hear your voice and looking forward to this conversation.
Hi, Deborah. It's so nice to meet you, and actually rather nice change to meet not on a Zoom call. I love nothing more than helping great storytellers tell their stories. Of course, I have my own stories. I have I think, quite an interesting background, but my passion is really to engage other people and hear about their stories. I've liked to do it in film and in documentaries and lots of different television programs, and now at TED. So when I'm looking for speakers, I'm most excited about people who haven't had books published and haven't already been in the public eye. I really like to search out people who have something interesting to say from a real world perspective, who perhaps are not the people that you would normally see giving a TED talk. So one example of that was when I produced the first ever TV program that I produced for TED, which was a special on education. And we had Bill Gates and the amazing Sir Ken Robinson, who sadly passed away recently. But one of the things that I really tried to do was to find some educators who were not known to the general public. And I found this extraordinary woman called Rita Pearson. And I've always said that you should be able to spread an important idea in one sentence. And her idea was very simply, every child needs a champion. And there's nothing more truthful than that. And so she gave an extraordinary TED talk in Brooklyn, in a theater. And the audience stood up at the end and gave her a standing ovation. And the saddest thing happened a few weeks after her TED talk. She passed away. But she left this legacy in her TED talk and in all the work that she did, which has helped so many people become educators as a result of that talk.
Oh, I just got chills on so many levels from what you just said. First of all, I didn't know Ken Robinson passed. And the story about Rita Pearson passing away right after she gave us that gem of a sentence and of a talk. Wow. Breathing into that. Will you indulge us just for a second? I know you have a beautiful background, and I didn't want to do a big Wikipedia oration at the beginning of this, but I would love you to tell us a little bit about your background, because it's so interesting. It is a story. It's your story. Can we hear it?
Well, my story began a long time ago in England. I am the daughter of German Jewish refugees. I had one sibling, Yvonne, who was 17 years older than me. And when I was, I think, 13 or 14, she won an Academy Award for costume design. So I was always very much the little sister who was rather determined not to go into the film and television business. So I started my career working in radio, telling the stories of real people, making radio documentaries, which was wonderful. And then I eventually did move into television in England, and in fact moved to Los Angeles about, it must be 25 years ago now. And that happened because I was producing a big TV series in England for Comedy Central called London Underground with Dennis Leary. And that was a very successful program in that it won Comedy Central their very first awards. So that was a great introduction to America. And I was at the Montreal Comedy Festival and met some great people there, and was invited to have a production deal on the Universal Studios lot, which was incredibly exciting. And I had a wonderful business partner, Trevor Hopkins, who eventually moved back to England, and I stayed in Los Angeles with my husband and 2 small children. And to cut a very long story short, eventually ended up running the Jim Henson Company. But when I was on the Universal lot, which is a huge lot if you've ever been there, you will know that right at the back of the lot are the Amblin TV and film studios where Steven Spielberg has his beautiful offices. And it was always my dream to be able to go through those locked gates to see what was behind them. And several years passed, and I had many different jobs. And whilst I was an executive at National Geographic, I found a book that I fell in love with, and I optioned it to become a movie. And what I didn't know in those very early days of being in America is that those gates of Steven Spielberg's Amblin Studios would open many times for me, as I ended up producing the 100-Foot Journey with Steven Spielberg and Oprah Winfrey. So I feel as if I've had rather a charmed and very lucky life. Very early on in my time in Los Angeles, I met an incredible film executive who's now in her 90s. Her name is Marsha Nassiter. And she told me that she had been born with the lucky gene. And to some extent, I feel I have also been born with the lucky gene. I've had a very fulfilling and exciting career. I have an incredible husband who has devoted his life to raising our 2 daughters. And in 4 weeks' time, I will become a grandmother. So as well as having a big career, I hope I have a very big career ahead of me as a granny. So I'm very much looking forward to that. And anybody who's ever worked with me will know and tell you that I believe that a work-life balance is essential for a happy life. So that's basically my story. I ran the Jim Henson Company. I was a senior executive at National Geographic, and my passion is storytelling.
I love your answer. It feels so unbridled in the sense that you just know what you have, and the lucky gene is a beautiful idea to say, I have it. But what you do with it is the extraordinary part. Doing what you do and being of service really to people so that we can all kind of get the mojo of your lucky gene and see what comes from it, all the beauty that you help create. And I love that movie, by the way. And the feeling you talk about walking onto a lot, I moved to Los Angeles in 2009, but when I was living in San Francisco, I was invited down to a time when Jahan Naheem won a TED Prize, and she launched this amazing project. I think it was called Pangea Day, and it was held on the Sony lot. And I went down, and I think I actually met Chris Alexander then, Anderson, and I met a bunch of people from TED, and I met, it was like a whirlwind day, and I remember thinking, wow, Los Angeles definitely has this vibe of absolute possibility, and being on the lot and seeing all that happening was like magic. So let's talk about magic a little bit in terms of the people that don't feel it, that don't have it, that don't feel like they are worthy of it. I want to go here for a second because I know that access to great work is now everywhere online. But for some reason, people tend to think things are not for them. I remember coming across somebody just recently who felt like, I went to a museum when I was in grade school, but he hadn't been in 25 years. What is that? And what do you do about that when you curate and create beauty in the world and stories in the world? When do you think about who's accessing it?
I think there are so many people in this world who have a very serious case of imposter syndrome, who feel that they are not worthy, and whether that be not worthy of being exhibited in a museum or gallery, or whether attending a museum or a gallery, or even picking up a complicated book to read because they think that they may not understand it. And I think a lot of that comes from childhood. Is that, again, to go back and talk about Sir Ken Robinson, Sir Ken Robinson believed that creativity was killed by education. And I happen to agree with that, because I think when young people soak in content, they're like sponges. And the older we get, the more self-conscious we often get, unless we have people around us that allow us to see the beauty in the world. My mantra is very much, life is not a rehearsal. And I wake up every morning and feel grateful for what I have. And it's the simple things in life that I appreciate. My husband is an incredible vegetable grower. And often at the end of a day working in my home office, I will go outside and I will look at the vegetable beds and look at what he will probably cook for dinner that comes directly from the garden to the table. And those are the things that excite me. I'm personally very excited about politics at the moment. I feel that we are about to enter a really interesting time in the United States. I've been a US citizen for quite a long time now, and voting is such a privilege. And to be able to have a say in our democracy and to actually get involved in local politics and roll one's sleeves up, which I have not done yet because I have just moved to Austin to be closer to our children. My husband and I just moved here. But I really want to be involved in community. And I find that rather than thinking of COVID, obviously it's a terrible thing and we have to get it under control and stop people dying and stop people being sick. But I have found being able to communicate on the phone and on video has allowed us freedom in a way that we don't have commuting time. We cut to the chase more quickly. We are able to really, really be more considerate to one another, to think about the things that are important to us. So from my perspective, I think that everybody has to seize the day. I know I'm sounding a bit cliched with all these seize the day and life's not a rehearsal, but there's a lot of truths in those sayings. And so many of us have got imposter syndrome, and we have to step outside of that and really do things that make us happy, read things that expand our mind. And I think TED goes a long way to do that. Not all TED Talks are seriously intellectual. There are some wonderfully entertaining TED Talks and some enlightening TED Talks from artists and creators that really show us a different way of looking at the world.
And to add to that, I particularly like how TED has little teeny TEDs sometimes, like 5-minute pieces that are so accessible and so delicious and delightful. And they are a great balance to the 18-minute talks that sometimes can be heady for people. But the diversity that TED offers is amazing, and that's why we love it. I want to ask you about the medium of television, because you are head of television, and that in itself makes me feel like it's accessible in different mediums than the TED Talks have been before, where they've been live and then online. But because you work with people like PBS and you're on the medium that is accessible to every household, that must be wonderful in a lot of ways, because it has this ubiquitous presence, and it's just there for everyone to turn on and turn off. So when you program, what's your connection between TED content and the content you do originally? So is there obviously a crossover, or are you doing just completely original content for TED television?
As well as a few TV specials for PBS, I've spent an enormous amount of time producing TED TV programs in India with Star TV in both Hindi, and last year in Hindi and in English. And those programs are seen all over India and have been seen by over 100 million people. And there's something quite extraordinary about working in a different culture, in a different language, with some of the most brilliant people I could ever have wished to meet. And exclusively, they are giving TED Talks, and they're all Indian, and they all have the most extraordinary stories to tell. And there was one particular woman that I'll just tell you about, named Chetna Gala Sinha, who is a woman from Mumbai who decided to marry a rural farmer who lived way outside of Mumbai, but still in Maharashtra, which is the state that Mumbai is in. And her talk was so extraordinary. She did the pilot program for me in India in Hindi. But of course I had a translation because I don't speak Hindi. And I invited her to come and speak in Vancouver on the main stage at our main conference. And rather like Rita Pearson, whose one line was so clear, every child needs a champion, Chetna's one line was, do not give poor advice to poor people. And her talk was so remarkable. And to see her on the TED stage in Vancouver get a standing ovation, knowing how hard she works in India. She was the first woman to set up a women's bank for rural women. Since she gave that talk, she's been going from strength to strength and is a well-known figure not only across India, but she was one of the, I think, 7 women who 2 years ago chaired the World Economic Forum. And so my joy is to, yes, make television, but not just in the US. I'm really fascinated in taking TED out into the world. And we have a commitment from Star TV for another 2 seasons of TED. And we're waiting to see what's happening with the pandemic, or whether or not we should try and make this content virtual. And we've been producing a lot of virtual content, which has been outstanding. We just did a 5-hour marathon. I think it was about 4 weeks ago on YouTube, which was our TED Climate Countdown, which is the first time TED has ever taken one initiative, which was looking at how do we get to carbon net zero. And we created 5 hours of content. It was curated by my colleague, Bruno Giussani, who is the European curator of TED, the international curator of TED. And I was responsible for producing all the content. And it went out on YouTube and was seen by over 15 million people. So that was a big thrill. So my passion is to collaborate, is to create content that is really meaningful, ideally with people from all over the world. And I think the Indian series is probably one of the hardest things I've done, working with a great team of incredibly bright women, mainly in India, to put that together. And it was hosted by Bollywood star Shah Rukh Khan, who of course has such a massive following in India. It really helped people come to the table to watch TED. And we did have speakers from all over the world, but they were all of Indian origin, and most of them still live in India. It was an absolute joy to bring that project to fruition.
I'm going to put a link to Countdown here. It was released on the 10th of October, but the performances and the talks are amazing, and I love for everyone to have access to that. As I hear you talk about specifically your work in India and that quote around don't give poor advice to poor people, and because I know you optioned the book that you read, I imagine that you're the kind of person that when you hear gems like that, you in your mind you option them. You're like, let me hold on to that statement and let me create a world around it so that it can live into itself. And I think that's where the difference between a producer and a visionary, that's where that difference lies. And when I hear you talk, you're way more than a producer, you're a visionary, because you keep your ear to things that really help shape our culture, and you run with them. I remember seeing the 100-Foot Journey, and it was something where we were dropped into a world and we rooted for everybody, and it was so warm and wonderful. And I imagine that having that success emboldened you to do what you're doing now, to say anything's possible. And I think that's what you're communicating here is everything's possible. Live your life as if today is the day, because it's not a dress rehearsal. And I want to ask you, where have you experienced resistance when it's around you or in one situation? How do you handle resistance when you see something so clearly, but the people around you don't?
I'm not sure how I feel about astrology, but I'm a Pisces, and I'm constantly swimming in the opposite direction to many people around me. And I find that mentoring younger women very satisfying to me personally, to help them have a foot up the ladder. I also have very strong opinions on things, and I'm not always as diplomatic as I perhaps should be. But because of that, many of the people who I've worked for have trusted me because they know that I will always tell them the truth. When it comes to being a producer or a visionary, I would never call myself a visionary, but what I like to be thought of as somebody who can not necessarily spot trends, but see the goodness in people, even when other people may not, and also look at stories that tell the triumph of the human spirit. I actually have another feature film in development outside of my TED work, which is based on a book called Stolen Time, written by a woman called Sunny Jacobs. And when I first moved to Los Angeles, she was my next door neighbor. What I didn't know about her at the time was that she had been incarcerated for 17 years, accused of killing 2 police officers who she did not kill, and that her husband had gone to the electric chair, accused of killing these police officers, and was also innocent. Many, many years later, my oldest daughter, Sophie, sent me an article that was in the New York Times about Sunny, and I immediately thought, how can I have lost touch with this extraordinary woman? But I had, and she now lives in Ireland, remarried, and brings into her home exonerees, innocent people who have been incarcerated often for the longest time, and helps them get back on their feet. She wrote this book, Stolen Time. I optioned it with a view to making it into a movie. And one day I'd gone to visit my friends at Amblin on the Universal lot, and I told a couple of the very brilliant executives there the story. And I didn't pitch it as a movie. I pitched it as a book that I just optioned and I was thinking of doing something with. And they said, we have to make this film. So that's a story that is deeply personal to me because I've known this woman probably for 25 years. And her story is truly the triumph of the human spirit. over terrible things that happened to her in her life. And so I am a producer, but I care deeply about what I produce and how I produce it. And I'm never in a hurry to make a film. I could have made many films after the 100-Foot Journey. I was certainly offered producing jobs of other people's material. But for me, I'm only interested in telling stories of people who I believe will shift the needle when other people hear them. And that, for me, is all about the triumph of the human spirit. So I'm not a visionary, I'm a producer, but I care deeply about the stories that I tell.
I think it would be really strange for you to say that you were a visionary. I agree. We can call you a visionary. But if you met someone and said, I'm a visionary, it would be like, that's enough. I'm moving to the other room. What an amazing story that you're working on now. We never know people until we know people. There are next door neighbors. There are mechanics. There are people just in our lives, in and out, and they all have stories. So I know as a producer, I feel also when I meet people, there's a story there. And I'm sure you do that every day. This has been such an amazing conversation to get to know you in this medium where we're just asynchronously vibing. Thank you for spending time on Swell. I'm going to open this up so that other people can come in. Swell conversations tend to ebb and flow, as the name suggests. And I hope that we always can hear your voice here. And as you move into your projects, I hope you can share them here. And I look forward to everyone joining in and connecting or just listening. It's been a joy, and I just will be constantly looking for the next great thing that you do. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Deborah. It was an absolute pleasure to talk to you. And I look forward to continuing the conversation. My very best wishes. Bye.
Juliet, Deborah, thank you so much for an amazing and riveting conversation. Yeah, wow, it's so nice to hear that there's somebody involved in TED that cares about bringing attention to the voices of people who are on the ground, of stories that are meaningful within the people. A lot of times I feel like TED seems to be focused on academics and people who are doing the research, but not so much the actual social science, the in viva social science, within the world. But thank you so much for, raising that awareness that you care. I think that's so important that there are people out there who want to bring attention to the voices of the people who actually are showing up in the community at a grassroots level, that are showing up with love and compassion, radical compassion, because oftentimes those people don't have the energy or they don't have the spirit to do marketing and PR and to get all those things in order, right? They're showing up in the world. I know that with myself, and I know that with my colleagues and my mentors and friends. It just consistently shows up. And then, ironically, you see the opposite end of people continuing to sell books and sell their retreats or sell their programs, but that the world isn't changing around them, which I think, maybe that's something we can address. But thank you so much for this conversation. You guys rock. Many blessings. Have a beautiful week. Hope to connect.